You're listening to the Ballet Piano Podcast, lifting the lid on dance accompaniment.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Ballet Piano Podcast. My name is Chris Hobson, and around the table with me is the full team. It's Akiko Hobson.
Hello.
Matt Gregory.
Hello, listeners and viewers.
And possibly one of my favourite people in the world, David Yeo. Hello, everybody. Hello. Right, this episode we are talking about playing for ballet variations, how you play for a ballet variation, how you prepare for it, how you practice it, and how you do it in the studio, and then also what teachers expect. So I think based on our experience, we're going to particularly focus on sort of how you do this in a school or a local school or a vocational school. We're not going to sort of get into the company level, because with companies, tempos are set, choreography set, and you are provided with the right music. But if you work in a vocational school, or you're a jobbing pianist somewhere, or you are going from here to there and you're working at many different places, you are not given that luxury that you have as a company pianist. So how does it all start? Well, for me, it's conversation with the teacher at the start.
100%.
Yeah.
If you know that you're going to be playing for a variation class, wherever you work, you go, first question, speak to the teacher. What is it? What's the variation?
Which version?
And then you
Yes.
say, which version?
Yes.
Because I think we've referenced this in previous episodes, but there are hundreds and hundreds of different versions of Swan Lake,
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, Nutcracker. And each have their own tempos, each have different cuts, and some will have extra music added in, or some ballets even have different variations borrowed from other ballets that
Lots
are
of times.
interpolated into that.
gosh.
You know, just because, you know, something was originally written by Tchaikovsky in Sleeping Beauty doesn't mean it can't be shoved into Nutcracker. You know,
Yeah.
all these things happen. So you've got to, I think the basic sort of like checklist, if you like, at the start is speak with the teacher, or speak with whoever's booking you. What is the variation? Which version is it? And then get the music. And then for that, I would start with a YouTube search.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'd go,
I mean, it's
we're so
better
lucky these
if the
days.
teacher can send the YouTube link. They're teaching.
if the teacher can,
yeah,
then
that's
that's
the
great.
best.
But if not, you can go onto YouTube, as we reference YouTube so much in the 2024 season, but it's there, and it's a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. So you've got to use it. But you can watch, 6 or 7 or 8 different principals from the Royal Ballet do the same variation,
Yeah.
and you
But-
can get a rough idea from that.
But and then if you're playing for the workshop for 11 years old, and then watching on YouTube Maria Nunes dancing the same variation, you cannot expect to play that
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah.
So you have to take it into consideration whether they're on the point shoes or not, or their experience that you might have to change the speed.
And sometimes at vocational schools especially, or schools that record their own works, they'll have recordings of, let's say, obscure solos or something that they haven't, it's not on, maybe not on YouTube.
Yeah.
And that might be another resource if you want to ask your school, do you have that recording of that music to help you?
I think visual recordings are the perfect way to go, aren't they?
Yeah.
Certainly as a starting point.
Yes.
That's where you go. And obviously each dancer is going to have their own tempo requirements, which we will all accommodate, to a certain degree.
When does it get beyond for you guys? When teachers are asking things to be slowed down so much that you almost lose the tune. What do you do?
I had a situation about this a long time ago in a place that I used to work in. Listeners, Google search it. I've worked in a couple of places, and pick one of those and throw a dart in the wall. And it was a dancer dancing the 5/4. Is it Sapphire, Sleeping Beauty? Not the BRB version, not Bentley's version, the male, but it's the female version. And they said, she can't do it this quickly. It needs to be slower. So you accommodate that to a certain degree, but it was almost like an adagio. It was dun dun da 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 dun dun da da da. So this girl could achieve, and I spoke up after the class, obviously I wasn't going to upset the dancer, but I said, if that's how she's going to do this and she's going to be marked on that by a committee of outside professionals, they're going to go, why is she dancing it at half speed? That's it. This is not the right solo for her. I think that for me was a step too far. It's like, you're ruining music for this. Yeah. That's not, and like, if you want to pull something out to add in the extra pirouette or whatever at the end of a solo and things like that, or, to get the double soda basque and things like that, that's great, but not to the complete detriment and ruinous, it's not even a word, ruinous of music.
Totally agree with you. I mean, you have to learn how to actually adapt as a dancer. So it's important that you actually keep the essence of the feeling of the music as a basis from which you actually then craft what you're doing. Yeah. And because technique has evolved and become so much stronger these days, everybody's doing 3s and 4s and what have you, pirouettes and what have you, and jumping higher and everything. You have to, as an artist, learn how to use what you can do to help you bring your performance to life within the music, within the feeling of the music.
Yeah. Within that structure of the music.
Rather than have the technique be the overarching thing that you're thinking about. That then becomes almost like acrobatics.
Yeah.
Because the romantic ballets don't require a really high arabesque. That's not the style, it's not the aesthetic of the romantic ballets.
And to hold a balance, it's not a balance that, everything comes to a stop.
Yeah.
It's just a suspension of something.
Yeah. I'm sure you agree as well. I like the teacher who say to the student, this is the speed I want, so dance. And half of the teacher I played in my life, they look at the dancer students and then start to slow me down or speed up.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should come that way. I think the teacher has to say, this is the speed I want, so make it happen, or maybe you reduce one pirouette, whatever. But you can't just speed down or speed up as you go along, and every time it's different, because we can't do this.
Yeah.
And an orchestra couldn't do that,
No.
couldn't they?
No.
So that's what we have to teach the students, is that you have to think about how you're going to work with an orchestra if you're lucky enough to be in a company. And if you want more time, then you've got to pinch it from somewhere else, in terms of your preparation earlier, or anticipating something else, so that you can do your 3 or 4 pirouettes, whatever it is.
It's so funny, like sometimes like students have their own recording and like CD, and when they dance with their CD, they get on with it. But when they have a pianist, they suddenly become, can you slow down here? Can you speed up here? And it just become like very impossible sometimes.
Yeah. But my experience of playing variations is with the lovely Anita Young. And she doesn't believe in YouTube because she's danced all these ballets.
Yeah.
And she's got so much context and so much history. And she'll say about the breadcrumb fairy that it's supposed to sound like dropping breadcrumbs. And she's got all that information, which is the reason why the music is written that way. And it was choreographed to the music at that tempo back then. And she's music first. Yes. And the technique and choreography fit on the music, come hell or high water sort of thing, Totally. And she knows she can sing anything. She is epic.
Music is the lifeblood of what we do in this art form, and so
I'm so going to buy you a T-shirt with that on it. Music is the lifeblood of dancing. Jonathan
does a wonderful impression. I won't do it on the podcast.
Will you do it on Instagram if people follow us at Ballet Piano Podcast?
100%.
Okay, there you go. So let's go back to where we started, because we always digress, don't we? We're very good at that on this podcast. It's why you love us. So you've sat at home, you've watched your variation, you've spoken to your teacher, you know what you're doing, you've practiced it, so it's in your fingers. But then you get into the studio, and that's when it can get tricky sometimes, because dancers are different shapes. And as much as we said earlier on in the app that, this is the tempo it is, we're all artists and we're all musicians. So what is the perfect tempo on a Tuesday evening isn't the perfect tempo on a Friday evening or for a Saturday matinee. So you've got to be adaptable. And I think even more so, like David's mentioned a lot this season about, like we've talked a lot about eye contact and looking up and being out there. If you are playing a variation, you've got to, like any accompanist, you cannot have your head buried in a score and go, this is how it is from start to finish. You've got to have at least one eye, if not both eyes.
Yeah.
On what you're accompanying, because it's not a variation isn't a ballet class. It's, like ballet class, we can all have fun, we can mess about, we can do all sorts of amazing stuff. But in a variations class, it's like, it's getting serious, isn't it? S is getting serious here. So, and this is, students and dancers are crafting what they're going to do on the stage, or they're learning, the fundamental building blocks of their career. So you've got to watch them, because not everybody will jump at the same speed. So, and then it's like, I suppose, I don't know, the biggest question for me, David, actually is who leads that? Because some teachers would say, follow the dancer.
Yeah.
And other teachers say, don't. And that I struggle with that sometimes, because I don't know. And maybe that's a conversation I should have before working with different ballet masters and
I think
teachers.
that's a really good idea to do that. To have that conversation beforehand. And also really, I mean, when you're learning something, like, I'm sure it's the same thing, when you're learning a new piece, you have to go slower, don't you? To learn the actual technical parts of it. And the more you practice it, the more proficient you get, and then the faster you can get. So in terms of learning a solo, it's exactly the same thing. And even though someone is very, very tall and have long legs, and they might naturally, move slower than somebody else, by the time you've actually simulated the actual choreography, they can go a lot faster. So I think I agree with you. Have that conversation beforehand with the teacher, and they'll probably be able to fill you in on how to go about it.
It's like, do you want us, I mean, and I don't mean ruin the music particularly, but I mean, accommodate slightly if somebody's, a tall dancer and they're jumping, 12, 13 feet into the air, or you've got a slightly smaller dancer who doesn't have that quite same elevation, do you want us to, just give a slight little bit of extra time for literally the physique of the dancer. It's not his interpretation, it's the physique of the dancer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's within reason, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and also how much they have already rehearsed.
Absolutely.
And actually, when some ballets were created, let's say that the ballerina was a shorter ballerina, and of course the choreography made at that time was, she was a fast mover. She had neat, fast footwork. Fast forward to 2024, and you've got a tall ballerina doing that.
It's not going to be the same.
No,
is it?
it's not. So there's those, the physical allowances.
It's a funny one. I think variations for me is a minefield.
Oh, right.
And then, I know in the past when I've worked in vocational schools, you can have pianists who will write down exactly what the metronome marks are for things, and then they'll say, slow down at this bit for this dancer and this bit for this dancer. And I do agree with that to a certain extent. But if you've got 16 or 17 people doing the same variation, I can't do that.
Does anybody think that it's a bit trickier to play for girls' variations than boys' variation?
Yes.
Because I do find it, I find boys' variation a lot more easier to predict the speed than the girls' variation.
That's interesting. Why is that, Akiko?
I don't know, but first of all, I think girls' variation tend to be longer and have many speed change. And also, it's something to do with point shoes or fete or something, balance or something, pose. And there's lots of like that happening in the girls' variation more than boys' variation. Boys' variation tend to be more straightforward.
Right. I suppose it's a sweeping sort of generalization. Male variations are either a big waltz or a big sort of march style, aren't it? I know these very, but as a generalization, that's your male variations, and you've got the quick two. Like if you look at all the Paquita variations for the women, most of them are 2/4,
right?
And they're quick. They're quick. But I was thinking when you were saying about tempo earlier, and it's the tempo it's choreographed and the learning tempo. I find that some people around the world can get stuck on learning tempos and forget that. So then, so your cohort of dancers will get good at this particular tempo, and then that's it, and then that's the tempo. It's like, that's not the tempo. That's at least 30% under where it should be. And then sometimes teachers can forget that actually, no, it needs the kick up the backside.
Yeah, that's the teacher's job then. To move it on. to get up to where it nearer where it should be.
Yeah.
Because then people know it in the bodies, and I'm guessing dancers get comfortable with that in the body.
You don't want to be too comfortable.
That is the voice of experience. That's another t-shirt there. You don't want to be too comfortable.
The other thing that I really would like to ballet dancers, ballet teachers to tell to the student is that, you got to be on the music, because when we can adjust for them by looking at them, and we go slower and they go slower and we go, and it's just not good. So they, no matter what, they have to do their very best to be on the music. And if something happens, we have to adjust.
Yes.
And actually, this is slightly going off from variation onto repertoire. But for example, fight scene in Romeo and Juliet, the tempo is so specific because it's supposed to sound like a fight, like a sword fight.
Yeah.
And if that's slowed down, it's not going to sound like a sword fight anymore.
Yeah.
So, music is at a specific tempo for a reason from when it was composed.
Yes.
And I guess that's the same with variation. If it's supposed to be something sprightly and it's slowed down to accommodate whatever, it's not going to sound or look sprightly anymore.
Yeah.
Totally.
I always remember my music director at Northern Ballet Theatre, as it was, John Price Jones, saying to me, and it was a ballet that we were doing by a film composer who'd written the music, and he said, we have to respect the music even if we don't like it. He's like, we can make adjustments through this, but we have to respect the composer's wishes, be it Tchaikovsky or Stephen Warbeck. We have to have the respect for the composer in this. And I think I've always tried to keep that in my sort of, I don't know, professional life. I was like, I will do what I can to micro adjust for you, but I will, I have to respect the composer.
Yeah.
And it's him or her music that you are dancing to. It's their music you are dancing to. So you have to respect it, I think.
It's very good.
I think so. Anyway, listen, listeners, on that note, we're going to stop now because I can hear Hazel crying in the room next door with Joshua.
This is my face as well.
Yes. So we're going to bring it to a close. It was a good point to close. So join us next time. Don't forget to follow us on the socials at Ballet Piano Podcast. Email us at balletpianopodcast@gmail.com, or even take a look at our website at balletpianopodcast.com. So until next time, it is goodbye from me.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.